Document examination of friction ridge impressions. So we've got a couple of latent print cards here, but here we have lift number 1. So here is a latent print. And then lift number 2, we've got 3 prints. All right. And so we're going to document our comparison. Now there's documentation that takes place when you are collecting the print. But as far as the comparison process, there's a couple of ways to document. One is with minimal documentation, and then another is by enhancing it, adding a lot. So it just depends on what your department wants you to do, or in some cases, the type of case it is. If you had a petty theft, minimal documentation could be just fine. But if you have a homicide, maybe you want to use the expanded. So let's see that real quick. So what do we have to document? Well, I've got a print card, I've made a comparison, and now I'm done. I need to document it. I'm going to have general notes. I'm going to have the elements of analysis, the evaluation, the verification, and then the disposition of those latents. When we have general notes, we're going to include which latent prints are suitable for comparison. And you have these labeled. So you saw L1 and L2. That's what we normally will do. Now when you collect them, you might give them an item number at the crime scene. But when we get them for analysis, we're going to label them L1, L2, L3, L4. You get the picture, right? So we're going to indicate in our general notes which latent prints are suitable for comparison, the source of the known prints to be compared. Now, where did the known source come? The donor. There's a 10 print card, or it's through APHIS, we note that. And then also the results of the comparisons and who verified the conclusions. So in other words, this general notes part is like a summary. And then we go into some other detail. Then the next thing is our elements of analysis. So what we're going to do there is we're going to include the existence and clarity of level 1, level 2, and level 3 detail for each of the prints, the possible anatomical source, which finger or which portion of which finger, the factors influencing the clarity of the impressions. So, it could be that there was pressure distortion, deposition pressure, development medium, the powder, the substrate. We'll put any factors that are influencing what our result is. All right. Now, then, as far as on the elements of an analysis, again, there's 2 ways we can do this, with minimal or with expanded. So with minimal, we can often just make notations on the card itself. When you're trained, they'll tell you which to do, in which situations, and then you'll do it the way your department wants it done. But the minimal documentation can be done right on the card. All right. But you still have your general notes. On the expanded documentation, you're going to have more detail. If you have expanded, you probably have a worksheet. So that's what I normally see is if you're not doing expanded, you just mark on the card. If you're doing an expanded one, then you're going to have a worksheet. So you fill out the worksheet and you put in detail. Here, our detail could be, this is the exterior patio door glass. The analysis is a black powdered lift. 3 fingerprint impressions suitable for comparison, A, B, and C, are consistent with simultaneous number 7, 8, and 9 fingers. So we're referring that to the 10 print card. Okay. Then the second thing would be substrate. The appearance of the latent print is consistent with the indicated substrate glass from a patio door. Third point, anatomical aspect. Based on the adjacent impressions, L2A is consistent with the impression of a left index finger. All right. Matrix, consistent with normal residue. Deposition pressure, average deposition pressure across the entire. So you're putting in a whole lot of extra detail. Then we go to distortion. I won't read that. Level 1, good clarity, small count, left slant loop, approximately 4 ridges from delta to core. Level 2, good clarity overall. We're talking about this print right here. Good clarity overall, level 2, ridge paths discernible through most of the impression. Some become unclear along the edges of the impression. Ridge paths are difficult to follow just above the core of the impression. Level 3, areas of good, fair, and poor quality throughout the impression. Now, if you're using APHIS, you're going to also document which latent prints were searched, which APHIS databases were searched, the dates the searches were completed, who launched the search, and who evaluated the results. Then there's the evaluation. Now we're talking again about the documentation. We have our general notes, we have our analysis, then we have the evaluation. We need to document the conclusion of each comparison conducted. This documentation may be minimal or quite detailed, depending on your agency's requirements, and again, maybe even the type of case. So minimal documentation can be annotation on the notes, lifts, or as you see here, the name and identifier of the source of the impression, the anatomical source, which finger. So right here it has number 7. The identifier, initials of the examiner. So if you're the examiner, you've got to have your initials on here. The date the conclusion was reached, and the source of the impression. We have Jane Doe, and this is the source of the impression. Okay, so you could do all that on the card, or if you're going to do an expanded documentation of the evaluation, you're going to go into more detail. So if it was that same fingerprint that we're talking about, it might look like this. L2 exterior patio glass, door glass. Analysis, black powder lift. 3 finger impressions suitable for comparison ABC are consistent with 7, 8, and 9, normal matrix, average, okay. And then here's because we're talking about the evaluation, who did you compare with? Exemplars compared and conclusions. Well, I had 3 individuals to compare with. Maybe this was the 3 highest candidates. John Doe, ID number so-and-so, negative, and the date that I came up with that. Then Susanna Smith, her ID number, that was also negative. And then the next day, I finally got around to Jane Doe. This is her date of birth, and latent 2A equaled finger 7, latent 1 and latent 2B equaled 8, and so forth, and the date that I did that. So that's how we would document that. In our evaluation, whether it's minimal or expanded, the goal of documentation is ensure that the examiner or a person reviewing the case can discern these 3 things: which latent prints were suitable for comparison, the source of the exemplars to be comparing, the conclusions from each comparison. Then there's the verification, again in this documentation process. The conclusions should be documented. The technical or procedural manual should indicate which conclusions must be verified and how the verification is documented. Whenever you have an identification, you need a verification. So there, I'll put that to rest right now. For some agencies, I mentioned this before, only the individualizations are verified. For other agencies, all conclusions are verified. Sometimes it depends on the type of case. The person verifying the conclusion should place his or her own personal marking and date in the case record. So that person is essentially writes their own report, or if you're working on a worksheet, they fill out a section of the worksheet. And so you have part of it you filled out, and they have part they filled out. All right, that's good enough there. And then the last is we want to then indicate what we did with the latent lifts. So you record that as well. And what is done with them? Well, often they're put in a locked file cabinet. And so you would go ahead and indicate that. They may be stored on a server or a CD that's burned. You indicate what's done with them.